Chapter 1. The Weight of Morning. The morning sun pierced through the rusted metal slits of the window, streaking light across the worn cement floor. Peterson Joseph sat up in his creaky bed, his curly hair wild from sleep. He stretched, cracking his knuckles, then sighed. Another day in Cap Haitian. Outside, the neighborhood stirred, roosters crowed, dogs barked, and vendors shouted the prices of fresh produce in sing-song Creole. Inside their two-room house, the smell of fried plantains mixed with the sour scent of wet laundry. His mother, Altagrace, was already at work, arranging avocados, mangoes, and breadfruit into a worn straw basket. She hummed a low tune, an old folk melody, sad but strong, as she prepared for another exhausting day at the market. Ever since their father walked out to live with another woman, everything had fallen on her shoulders. And she carried it all: grief, hunger, school fees, hope, without complaint. In the cramped corner they shared as a bedroom, Amanda and Miranda, his twin sisters, were already arguing. "C'est pas you qui t'ai act yo. That's not you who bought them," Amanda snapped, tugging at a pair of socks. "Oui, men say mwen qui t'ai meet yo en premier." "Yes, but I wore them first," Miranda replied, yanking them back. Peterson smirked but said nothing. This was normal. Loud. Familiar. A kind of chaos that somehow brought comfort. As he pulled on his faded school uniform, his thoughts drifted to the growing pressure he felt each day. He wanted to do more for his family. Watching his mother struggle with swollen feet and tired eyes lit a fire in him, but not the kind that burst into anything useful, just a slow burn of frustration. He hated it. But he felt trapped. When you live in poverty, sometimes the line between right and wrong isn't so clear. As they stepped outside, the city opened up around them. The sun was rising fast, casting everything in a golden glow. Brightly painted tap-taps rolled by, music blasting from their speakers. Street vendors held up their goods: fried marinade, fritters, fresh sugarcane, plastic-wrapped candy. Amanda and Miranda chattered beside him about a math quiz and a boy one of them liked. He didn't listen. His eyes scanned the street, watching for signs of trouble, keeping alert. He wasn't just a student. He was something in between. And every step he took felt like it could tip him one way or the other. But his family, they had no idea. Chapter 2. Sparks in the Yard. The afternoon sun was merciless over Lycée Philippe Guerrier. Heat shimmered off the cracked concrete yard, and the aging fans in the classrooms groaned uselessly against the rising temperature. The air inside the school felt thick, like breathing through wet cloth. Peterson Joseph sat at the back of his classroom, half-focused, his chin resting in one hand. The teacher's voice sounded like static. His mind wasn't on verbs or equations. Instead, his eyes kept drifting toward Nail. She sat 2 rows ahead of him, her back straight, her braids tucked neatly into a bun, her pen moving with quiet confidence. There was something about her, graceful, but sharp like flint. She never laughed too loud, never wore too much. She didn't need to. Peterson liked her. Had liked her for a while now. But he never said a word. He wasn't the kind of boy who knew what to say. Not when he had so much on his mind and too much weight on his shoulders. When the bell rang for recess, he slipped out into the dusty schoolyard. The sun hit him like a slap. He shielded his eyes, looking around for Amanda and Miranda. They usually met by the old mango tree, where the younger kids played hopscotch with chalk lines and bottle caps. But before he could take 3 steps, he heard the shouting. A crowd had gathered by the west fence. Teenagers moved like sharks sensing blood. Peterson recognized one of the voices immediately: Jean Daniel, a class clown with a bad attitude and something to prove. Peterson pushed through the ring of bodies just in time to see him shove a smaller boy to the ground. It was Wilkins, a quiet kid from the year below. His glasses were cracked, his backpack ripped. "Oh pa Janm apran, T crass. You never learn, little boy," Jean Daniel barked. Peterson felt something stir in his gut. A familiar itch. The kind that came before things got violent. He pushed through the crowd. "Woy, hey," Peterson shouted, stepping between them. "O pense ou ka fe sa epi read kansa." You think you can do that and just walk away? The crowd oohed. Jean Daniel turned slowly, sizing him up. OVLEJWE Malvain, Peterson. O Ponce OU Gen K. You want to play tough, Peterson. You think you have heart. M Gen Pleash K Pace OU, free, I have more heart than you, brother, Peterson shot back, fists clenched. The circle closed tighter. Some kids pulled out phones. Someone whispered, Yo Prawl Guman. They're going to fight. Peterson had fought before. But this was school. This was supposed to be his normal life. Before it could go further, a voice pierced the noise. Supervisor AP Vinny. The supervisor is coming. It was Nail. She had vanished the moment the shoving started, and returned with the tall supervisor in a white shirt and mirrored sunglasses striding across the yard like a thunderstorm. The crowd exploded, scattering in every direction. Jean Daniel backed away with a hiss, throwing one last glare. Peterson didn't move. His pulse still raced, his body ready for something that didn't come. Nail walked past him slowly. She didn't smile. But her eyes met his. She saw him. Not just the boy in the back row. Him. And then she was gone. But Peterson knew something had shifted. Not just in the yard, but inside him. This world wasn't going to let him coast much longer. And soon, schoolyard fights might be the least of his worries. Chapter 3. Uneasy Alliances. After the fight in the schoolyard, the supervisor wasted no time. He marched Peterson, Jean Daniel, and Wilkins into his office and made them sit on a long wooden bench, side by side, under the scorching glare of the midday sun pouring through the window. He didn't scream. He didn't need to. His voice was sharp and cutting, the kind that made you sit straighter without realizing it. 3 boys. 3 different grades. Same problem. You think this school is the street. He gave each of them a warning slip, then pointed toward the yard. Think about what you're doing before you ruin your futures. Back on the bench outside the office, silence hung thick in the air. I didn't even throw a punch, Peterson muttered, breaking it first. You were going to, Jean Daniel replied. I saw it in your stance. Wilkins hugged his torn backpack to his chest. My glasses are cracked. Again. Jean Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. Yeah, my bad, bro. I was mad. Didn't mean to go that far. Peterson raised an eyebrow. You always that angry? Nah, Jean Daniel said with a faint grin. Only when the heat's messing with my brain. They all chuckled, just a little. The tension eased. The hostility drained, replaced with something new. Curiosity. You guys ever hang out? Jean Daniel asked. Not really, Peterson answered. Not until now. Well, Jean Daniel said, maybe we should. We already fought. That means we've passed the test. Wilkins laughed quietly. What test is that? The dumb teenage boy test, Jean Daniel grinned. But the grin didn't last long. His expression darkened. Look, real talk, he began, his voice dropping. Things been rough at home. My mom's sick. No job. Rent late. I got 2 little sisters who cry every night 'cause they're hungry. He looked up, serious now. That's why I started doing side work. For this group in the neighborhood. Nothing crazy. Just running messages. Watching corners. Sometimes I get a little extra for helping with deliveries. Peterson and Wilkins sat quietly, absorbing every word. I get paid, Jean Daniel continued. It ain't much, but it's something. If y'all ever want in, I can put in a word. It's not for everyone, but it helps when you got nothing. Peterson's jaw tightened. He didn't respond. Wilkins looked away. Just then, a loud voice shouted across the yard. There he go. That's him. A group of teens appeared, 4 of them, all older. They wore red braided bracelets and had matching designs carved into their backpacks. Their eyes locked on Jean Daniel. We didn't forget what you said to our boy last week. One of them barked. Without warning, they charged. Jean Daniel barely had time to get on his feet. Peterson stood, fists clenched. Wilkins froze. The fight was coming. And this time, it wasn't just about schoolyard pride. Chapter 4. Clashing Instincts. The schoolyard had never felt so small. The hot afternoon air seemed to tighten like a noose as the four older teens rushed in with a wave of aggressive energy. Peterson didn't even have time to think. He stepped in front of Jean Daniel by instinct, and the fight began. The first blow came fast. Peterson ducked under a wild swing and countered with a punch to the ribs. Jean Daniel had tackled another attacker to the ground, rolling in the dust. Wilkins, wide-eyed and pale, froze for a second before dashing behind the stairwell. He was no fighter. His small frame trembled as he crouched, praying not to be noticed. Peterson took a hit to the shoulder, stumbling back, but he gritted his teeth and lunged forward. He wasn't a trained boxer, but street instincts took over. Punch. Duck. Kick. He was fighting to protect Jean Daniel, Wilkins, himself. Maybe even his pride. Jean Daniel fought like a hurricane, wild but effective. The two of them soon found rhythm, and in spoken sync. Jean Daniel swept a leg just as Peterson jabbed high, forcing their opponent to the ground. Another one grabbed Peterson's shirt, throwing a punch to his jaw. He tasted blood, but didn't back down. It was chaos. The gang boys came at them with street fury, flailing arms and heavy kicks. Peterson and Jean Daniel adapted, backing each other up, covering each other's blind spots. 2 against 4. It wasn't fair. But they made it work. They dropped one boy. Then the second. But it came at a price. Jean Daniel's lip was split. Peterson's arm hung sore and limp at his side. Blood dripped from a cut above his eyebrow. Then it got worse. One of the boys, the biggest of the group, pulled out a blade, a rusted kitchen knife, its edge jagged and stained. "Yo pa Jen Anyan Su saw. You ain't got nothing on this," he growled, rushing toward Jean Daniel. Peterson's heart seized. Time slowed. He saw the flash of metal heading for Jean Daniel's side. Without thinking, he threw himself forward, tackling the attacker just in time. They tumbled, the knife slicing through the air above them. Peterson grunted, pinning the teen's wrist to the dirt, but the boy fought back with everything he had. The blade shook inches from Peterson's throat. His muscles burned, face twisted in desperation. Jean Daniel tried to help, but stumbled, dizzy from a blow to the head. "Move," the boy spat, shoving upward. "I said drop it." A thunderous voice cracked through the yard. The tall supervisor in the white shirt and mirrored sunglasses stormed out of the building, fury radiating from every step. In a flash, he grabbed the knife wielder by the back of the shirt and yanked him off Peterson. The boy flailed, but the man twisted his wrist and the blade clattered to the ground. Silence. The rest of the gang boys, beaten and bruised, backed away, stunned. "You four," the supervisor barked. "And you too," he pointed at Peterson and Jean Daniel, inside. "Now. You too, Wilkins. Don't think I didn't see you hiding." Wilkins peeked from his corner and shuffled forward sheepishly. Inside the hallway, the air was cool but heavy. Every footstep echoed with tension. The fight may have ended, but consequences hung in the air like a storm cloud. In the office, the supervisor locked the door. "You boys think this is a joke," he snapped. "You want to throw away your future for some street nonsense." Peterson stayed quiet, knuckles red, shirt torn. Jean Daniel wiped his bloody mouth and stared at the floor. The supervisor's eyes landed on the knife. That could have ended with a body on the ground. Then what? Wilkins shuffled nervously, clutching his bag like a shield. The man sighed, dropping his tone. "You think you're men. But men protect. They don't destroy. And right now, all I see are scared kids trying to act tough." No one responded. The weight of his words sank in. "I should call your parents. I should suspend every one of you." Peterson lifted his head. "Sir, please. We didn't start it," Jean Daniel added. "They came for me. It's 'cause of something I said last week. I didn't even know they were gonna show up." The supervisor stared long at them both. Then looked at Wilkins. "And you?" Wilkins swallowed. I don't fight. I just wanted it to stop." After a long pause, the supervisor rubbed his temples. "I'm not done with you yet. Go sit outside. I need to make some calls." They filed out quietly. Outside the office, Jean Daniel sat beside Peterson, leaning back against the wall. "You saved me," he said after a beat. Peterson shook his head. "You'd have done the same." "Maybe," Jean Daniel muttered. "But I won't forget it." They sat in silence, bruised, bleeding, but bonded. Something had changed between them. Something real. The lines between enemy, friend, and brother blurred under the burning Haitian sun. And Peterson knew, this was only the beginning. Chapter 5. Echoes and Symbols. After the brutal incident in the schoolyard, the supervisor kept his tone stern but didn't raise his voice again. He eyed each of the boys before letting out a heavy sigh. "You're not going back to class today," he said. "Go home. Bring your parents tomorrow. Every one of you, except Wilkins." Peterson, Jean Daniel, and the others exchanged glances. Wilkins gave a small, surprised nod of gratitude. The supervisor turned his attention to the 4 attackers and finally asked their names. Gregory, the tallest of them, mumbled. The others followed. Alfred, Tony, Jacques. The supervisor wrote the names down, then waved them all away. "Go. And don't make me regret this." The boys left the office one by one, each carrying their own thoughts. Jean Daniel muttered under his breath, clearly not done with the adrenaline in his system. Wilkins lagged behind a little, keeping his gaze low as if the weight of the day was finally sinking in. Outside, the schoolyard had returned to a normal buzz. Kids were in class, the distant hum of recitation and chalk on blackboards filling the background. But for Peterson, the day was far from ordinary. His body ached, not just from the fight but from the pressure of everything building up lately. When he reached home, his mother noticed the bruises right away. "Kisa qui pace," she gasped, rushing over with a damp rag. Peterson winced but didn't pull away. "It was just a little thing at school," he said softly. She stared at him, torn between concern and disappointment. "You're bringing your parent tomorrow?" she asked. He nodded. "Yes," she sighed, pressing the cloth to his forehead. "You have to tell me if things aren't going well. I don't want you to carry everything by yourself," she said. "Okay, Mom." Later that night, Peterson lay in bed, his limbs still sore and his head buzzing with what-ifs. He held his phone loosely, scrolling without focus until a message popped up. It was from Nail. "Hey. I saw everything from the window. Are you okay?" He stared at the message, a rush of emotion hitting him. She saw all of it. Part of him wanted to vanish. Another part, one he didn't fully understand, felt seen. "Yeah. Just sore. Thanks for asking," he replied. "You're brave. Just wanted you to know that," she answered almost instantly. He didn't know how to respond. So he simply stared at the screen, reading her words over and over. Across town, Jean Daniel and Wilkins sat by a street merchant who made fried marinade and banane peze. The air was thick with the smell of hot oil, spices, and charcoal smoke. The flickering fire cast dancing shadows over the cart. "I'm telling you," Jean Daniel said, rubbing his jaw, "Gregory fights like he got cement in his fists." Wilkins chuckled, handing over some cash to the merchant. "I got this one." Peterson raised an eyebrow. "You sure?" "Yeah. I don't pay rent. I can buy y'all dinner once in a while." Jean Daniel and Peterson looked at each other, a little sheepish. "Next time, it's on us," Peterson said. "For real," added Jean Daniel. "You already paid for the painkillers earlier." They sat on makeshift stools, eating quietly, savoring each bite of the hot, greasy food. The tension from earlier had faded, replaced with a strange sense of brotherhood. "You think we'll get suspended?" Wilkins asked between bites. "Nah," Jean Daniel replied. "If they were gonna do that, they would have already. But we gotta show up with our folks, or they'll think we don't take it serious." As they wrapped up the meal, they watched a group of little kids playing with bottle caps and chalk. Laughter echoed down the alley. "Life's simple when you're that small," Wilkins mused. "Too simple," said Jean Daniel. "They don't know what it's like yet." They finished the last bites, thanked the merchant, and stood to leave. "See y'all tomorrow," Peterson said, slinging his backpack over one shoulder. "Bright and early." With parents, Wilkins replied with a grin. They parted ways under the streetlights. Peterson walked alone through the maze of cracked sidewalks and flickering lamps. The city hummed softly at night. Distant radios playing compa, dogs barking from behind fences, the sound of mopeds buzzing down alleys. Then something shimmered in the corner of his eye. A puddle by a broken curb caught the flicker of a nearby bulb. He stepped closer, curious. Inside the water was something metallic, half submerged. He bent down, brushing aside debris and murky liquid. A necklace. The pendant was unlike anything he'd ever seen. 2 snakes circling 3 skulls merged together at the temples, eyes glowing faint green even under the dull street lamp. It pulsed faintly. As soon as he touched it, a cold spike ran through his fingers, up his arm, then deep into his spine. The world seemed to twist. His vision blurred. Whispers. He heard them. Not voices, but echoes. Not words, but meanings. His breathing grew shallow. His knees buckled. And then, darkness. Peterson collapsed beside the puddle, the necklace clutched tightly in his hand. A soft green glow remained under his curled fingers, barely visible in the night. Chapter 6. Whispers Beneath the Pillow, Part 1/2. Peterson woke up to the smell of boiling coffee and fried plantains, his eyes blinking slowly against the bright slivers of sunlight leaking through the gaps in the wooden shutters. His head pounded. His body ached. But it wasn't the soreness from a fight, it was the kind of heaviness that came from confusion. He sat up slowly in bed, rubbing his temples. How did I get here? The last thing he remembered was walking home after eating with Jean Daniel and Wilkins. Then the puddle. The necklace. That strange glow. The cold. The sudden dizziness. Then, nothing. He looked down at his hand. It was empty. No necklace. No proof. But he felt it, an absence. Like something had been with him and now hid somewhere in the room. He pulled off the sheet and searched the bed, patting the mattress, checking under it. There. Beneath his pillow. The medallion. Its silver body shimmered faintly in the dim light, the snakes twisted around the 3 skulls like they were in motion. The green glow had faded, but it still felt alive. Peterson didn't touch it again. He left it there, hidden, and rose to his feet, stretching with a grunt. His stomach growled as he walked into the kitchen. His mother, Altagrace, stood over the stove, her back slightly hunched, stirring a pot with one hand and flipping plantains with the other. She glanced over her shoulder at him. You slept late, she said. I didn't feel good, Peterson muttered, sliding into a chair. Headache or something. You always get something after trouble. He looked up, surprised. You heard. School called yesterday, she replied, her tone flat. They want me to come today. He rubbed his face, groaning. Yeah. That's what I needed to talk to you about. Altagrace turned off the stove, plated the food, and set it in front of him. A simple meal, fried plantains, a sliver of avocado, and a thin slice of sausage. She sat across from him, her eyes soft but tired. You gonna tell me what happened? Peterson took a bite first. Then a breath. There was a fight, he said. Actually. 2. First with Jean Daniel and a younger kid. Then later, some older boys came after us. One of them pulled a knife. Altagrace's eyes widened, but she didn't speak. I stopped him. We got lucky. Supervisor broke it up. No one got stabbed. She nodded slowly, her fingers laced together. They said you need to come to school today, Peterson continued. To talk about it. Are you in trouble? I didn't start anything, he said firmly. I stood up for someone. That's all. She stared at him for a long moment, then reached across the table and gently touched his face. You're a good boy, Peterson. But this world. It's not kind to good boys who fight. I didn't have a choice. I know. She stood, her face tightening slightly. I'll come. But I don't have anything decent to wear. He opened his mouth to argue, but closed it. What could he say? It was true. Her church dress had a tear down the side. Her sandals were worn thin. She'd spent everything this month on school fees and groceries. I'll iron your best blouse, he offered. She gave him a tired smile. We'll manage. Later that morning, the schoolyard buzzed with low conversation as parents filed in, their expressions a mix of frustration, worry, and embarrassment. The office waited like a courtroom. A supervisor at the door guided them in one at a time. Wilkins was absent. He hadn't been called in. But the rest of the boys were there. Gregory, Alfred, Tony, and Jacques. Gregory's father was a broad-shouldered man with a belt already in hand. Alfred's mom shouted the moment she stepped through the gate. Tony stood still while his aunt hissed threats under her breath. Jacques, big sister, looked ready to slap someone. Peterson and his mother were the last to arrive. He noticed her shrinking beside him, her posture guarded. Her simple blouse was freshly ironed, but it couldn't hide the frayed collar. Her shoes squeaked with every step. She kept adjusting her scarf, as if it could somehow cover her poverty. Inside the office, the air was tense. The supervisor stood at the front with a notepad, the principal beside him. "Thank you all for coming," the supervisor began. "Today isn't about punishment, it's about accountability." Each parent was given time to speak. Each child was asked to explain their side. Most of them didn't have much to say. The principal frowned through most of it, nodding slowly, making notes. Gregory and his friends got scolded right then and there. One mother threatened to take her child out of school if this happened again. Another dragged her son by the ear on the way out. When it was Peterson's turn, he stood straight, his voice calm but firm. "I didn't fight to hurt anyone. I only got involved to stop someone from getting hurt." The supervisor nodded. "That's consistent with what we saw on the footage." His mother didn't speak much, only enough to say she supported her son and that he'd told her everything. Her voice was quiet, but it held strength. The principal scribbled something down. "We understand. Still, we can't ignore the fact that he was in the middle of 2 violent incidents. He'll be suspended for 2 weeks. Altagrace's shoulders sagged. Peterson didn't argue. He just accepted it. "Thank you for your time," the supervisor said. Outside, as they walked home, she finally broke the silence. "I'm proud you didn't lie. I never will. But next time," she said gently, "find another way to be brave." That night, Peterson lay in bed again, staring at the ceiling. He didn't touch the medallion. But it was there, tucked under the pillow. He could feel it. The house was quiet. His sisters snored softly in the corner. His mother had gone to sleep early. And then he heard it. Whispers. Soft. Distant. Like someone murmuring just behind the walls. He sat up, eyes darting. Nothing. He checked the door. Locked. The window. Closed. The sound faded. He lay back down. Minutes passed. Then it came again. Whispers. Not words. Just something close to them. Shapes of meaning. Echoes in the dark. He clutched the pillow, heart pounding. "It's the necklace," he thought. "It has to be. But what does it want?" He didn't sleep much that night. Chapter 6. Whispers Beneath the Pillow, Part 2 halves. The next morning, Peterson rose before anyone else. He hadn't really slept. The whispers had come and gone all night, soft, circling, impossible to understand. They weren't terrifying, exactly. But they weren't comforting either. Like a warning spoken in a language he didn't yet know. He washed his face at the basin, staring at his reflection. The cut above his eyebrow had begun to scab over. His eyes were red from lack of sleep, but something behind them had sharpened. After breakfast, Amanda and Miranda skipped off to school without him. His mother left shortly after to return to the market. Peterson sat on the edge of his bed for a while, unsure what to do with the weight of free time and the ache of suspension. He stared at his pillow. Then slowly pulled it aside. The medallion was still there. He picked it up cautiously. The metal felt warmer than it should have, like it had absorbed his body heat through the night. The snakes, silver coils caught the light strangely, and the skulls seemed more defined. Their mouths slightly open now. He couldn't be sure, but it looked different than before. "I know you're doing something," he whispered to it. But what? No answer. No glow. No reaction. Peterson slid it into a shoebox and pushed it under the bed. Dash dash dash. With 2 weeks of suspension ahead of him, Peterson wandered the city. He couldn't stay home all day. There was too much noise in his head and not enough silence in the house. He avoided the usual corners, especially anywhere his old gang might be lurking. He wasn't sure if he still belonged with them. Wasn't sure he ever did. He found himself walking past Jean Daniels' place. The small yellow house looked as worn as ever, cracks in the wall, a sagging roof, and a bucket catching rainwater by the front door. Peterson hesitated before knocking. Voices inside echoed through the walls. Then the door creaked open. Jean Daniel blinked. Yo. They stood in silence for a second, then grinned. Wanna go for a walk? Peterson asked. Jean Daniel grabbed his hoodie and stepped out. They didn't talk much as they strolled through back alleys and side streets, avoiding the loudest roads and trouble spots. It was the kind of walk friends took when they didn't need to say much, just be there. After a while, Jean Daniel broke the silence. My mom was pissed, he said. She didn't even show up at school. Told me she's tired of getting calls from teachers. She's still sick. Yeah, he said quietly. Cough's getting worse. Peterson nodded. Sorry, not your fault. But, thanks. They kept walking. You hear anything weird lately? Peterson asked suddenly. Jean Daniel gave him a look. Weird how? Like, at night. When you're alone. Jean Daniel squinted. You mean like, whispers? Peterson's heart skipped. You heard them too, once, Jean Daniel admitted. Few nights ago. Thought I was losing it. Same here. They exchanged glances, both suddenly uneasy. Maybe it's stress, Jean Daniel offered. Yeah, Peterson said. Maybe. But deep down, he didn't believe that. That evening, Peterson helped his mother sort produce for the next market day. He picked out bruised mangoes, cleaned baskets, and tied loose twine around bundles of thyme. Altagrace watched him with cautious eyes. You've changed, she said finally. How? You move quieter now. And you think more before you speak. He smiled slightly. I've had a lot to think about. Just don't let thinking turn into hiding, she warned. You're allowed to speak your truth. Even if it shakes the room. He nodded, grateful but unsure how to explain what truth he was even carrying. Later that night, when everyone was asleep again, Peterson reached under the bed and pulled out the shoebox. He sat cross-legged, staring at the medallion for a long time before finally holding it in his palm. He whispered into the dark, "What are you?" The green glow returned faintly, soft at first, then stronger. And the whispers followed. But this time, they weren't shapeless. They formed into a single, whispering word. Peterson, his name. Spoken in a voice he didn't recognize, yet somehow felt like he should. He dropped the medallion in shock. It hit the floor with a metallic thud and rolled into the corner. His chest heaved. Sweat prickled his forehead. He stumbled back onto the bed, staring wide-eyed at the shadowed wall. It spoke. It knew him. He didn't sleep at all after that. Chapter 7. The Weight of Silence. Peterson had barely slept. For the 4th night in a row, the whispers returned. Faint. Relentless. Crawling into his ears like mist under a door. They came from no single direction, from under the bed, behind the walls, from the ceiling. Yet when he turned on the light or opened the window to see if the wind was playing tricks, everything fell quiet. He hadn't told his mother. She already had too much to worry about. And the last thing she needed was to think her son was losing his mind after getting suspended. So he kept it to himself. But it was getting harder. 3 days into suspension. By now, Peterson had settled into a routine. Wake up late, help his mom with produce sorting, sweep the yard, wash clothes, walk to the corner store for water, and come back to pretend everything was normal. But it wasn't. The medallion remained hidden in the shoebox under his bed, yet every night he could feel its weight in his dreams, like it was still wrapped around his neck. And the whispers. They were growing clearer. Still not words. But, closer. That afternoon, Jean Daniel knocked on Peterson's door, sweaty and shirtless under the brutal sun. Yo, you good? Peterson nodded, but his eyes were tired. Jean Daniel leaned against the doorway. You look like hell, bro. You fasting or something? Sleep and I aren't talking right now. You sure? Are you just up late texting Nail, trying to write poetry? Peterson cracked a smile. She wouldn't even read it. She'd probably correct my grammar. Jean Daniel laughed. That's accurate. Peterson motioned for him to come inside. Need to show you something. Jean Daniel raised an eyebrow. You found $1 million in your mom's avocado basket. I wish. It's serious. Peterson led him into his room, pulled the shoebox from under his bed, and opened it. Inside, the medallion. Even wrapped in cloth, it seemed to emit a pulse. Jean Daniel leaned closer, his joking tone disappearing. What is that? Peterson unwrapped it slowly. The snakes. The 3 skulls. The faint green glow. I found it the night after the fight. In a puddle. Ever since then, he hesitated. I've been hearing things. Jean Daniel straightened. Like what? Whispers. Every night. Louder. Closer. I can't sleep. It's like it's calling me. Jean Daniel stared at him, then the medallion. I ain't gonna lie. That's creepy as hell. I didn't imagine it. I believe you, Jean Daniel said. You think I'd come all this way just to tell you you're crazy? Nah. You my boy. They sat on the edge of the bed in silence for a moment. Still, Jean Daniel muttered, if that thing ever starts levitating, I'm out. Peterson chuckled. I'll let you know in advance. So what now? Jean Daniel asked. You planning to wear it and start summoning zombies? No. But I need answers. Jean Daniel nodded slowly. Okay. Then let's figure this out. The 5th night. The whisper came louder. Peterson had just drifted off when it pierced his dreams like a scream submerged in water. Count Mwen. This time it was Creole. Real words. A voice, hoarse and layered, like it echoed from centuries past. O Jen Kwa. Men Pa Jen Chap. He shot up in bed, panting. Sweat soaked his sheets. His fingers reached under the pillow on instinct. The medallion wasn't there. But he hadn't moved it. Panicking, he scrambled from bed and found the shoebox. Empty. A cold rush flooded his spine. Suddenly, the whispers filled the room, spiraling around him, invisible yet everywhere. He turned in every direction. The room darkened. The window shuttered itself. The medallion was on the floor, glowing brighter than ever. He crouched to pick it up. And it burned his skin. He yelped and dropped it. But the pain wasn't just physical. It was inside his chest now, an ache he couldn't name. His heart throbbed, not just with fear, but recognition. This thing didn't just find him. It belonged to him. And it was waiting. The next morning, Peterson told his mom he needed to visit the local library. She didn't argue. She was just glad he was dressed and alert for once. At the library, he asked the clerk if they had any books on old Haitian symbols. The man scratched his beard and led him to a dusty corner. Peterson searched for anything that looked like the medallion, snakes, skulls, old VEVE'S symbols. He found a page in a thick tome titled, Spirits of the Crossroads, Forgotten Loa. There it was. The same medallion. Drawn in charcoal. 2 snakes. 3 skulls. The text beside it read, The Medallion of Zobop, a forbidden relic tied to the crossroads Loa that no longer speak. Said to hold a fragment of their rage. Its bearers are haunted, called into awakening. Only those bound by blood and sacrifice may wield its voice. Beneath that, beware its whispers. They begin with truth and end in madness. Peterson closed the book slowly, heart pounding. That evening, he met Jean Daniel again and told him everything. They sat in stunned silence. This just keeps getting weirder, Jean Daniel said. I don't know what it wants. But I don't think I can ignore it anymore. We need help, Jean Daniel said. From who? Jean Daniel hesitated. Maybe. Someone who knows spirits. A manbo, or hounjan. You know one. Jean Daniel nodded. An old lady in Cité Vincent. My aunt used to bring me there. Let's go tonight. Man, why always at night? Can't we visit creepy spirit ladies at noon like normal people? Peterson smirked. You scared? I'm not scared, Jean Daniels said, standing. I'm cautiously brave. Cité Vincent. When they reached the rusted gates of Cité Vincent, the air felt heavier. The streets narrowed. Jean Daniel led them to a weathered greenhouse. The porch sagged. Curtains blocked the windows. He knocked. He saw. Who is it? It's me, Jean Daniel said. Daniel. My aunt's boy. Pause. Then the door opened. A thin, elderly woman in scarves stood there. Her eyes sharp and clouded. She looked at Peterson, at the cloth in his hand. You brought that here, she said. We need help, Peterson said. I need to know what it's doing to me. She stared long and hard. Then opened the door wider. Then come in. If the Zobop has chosen you, your path has only just begun. End of chapter 7. Chapter 8. Packed in the shadows. The flickering candlelight inside the old woman's home in Cité Vincent cast jagged shadows on the mud walls. The air was thick with incense smoke, and every inch of the room seemed to hum with spiritual weight. Peterson sat stiffly on a straw mat, the medallion clenched in his hand. The whispers from it hadn't stopped since they'd arrived. Jean Daniel sat beside him, glancing around uneasily. The old woman shuffled over, a large scarf wrapped around her head and shoulders, her eyes milky but intense with knowledge. She poured steaming herbal tea into handmade clay cups and sat across from them. You came just in time, she said, her voice raspy but steady. That object you carry is no ordinary trinket. It's the mark of the Zobop. Jean Daniel raised an eyebrow. Zobop. You mean the ghost stories? No stories, she snapped. History. Painful, buried history. She gestured to a tattered book on her shelf, pulling it down with trembling hands. She opened it to a page filled with VEVE'S symbols and faded ink drawings of figures cloaked in smoke. The Zobop were once men and women who wanted more. More than life could offer. They turned to spirits outside the traditional LWA, spirits exiled for their chaos and defiance. These beings offered the Zobop great power, but demanded blood, obedience, and access to the world of the living. She pointed to the medallion. That is their key. A gate. With it, the boundary between our world and the spiritual realm blurs. The whispers you hear, they're not dreams. They're summons. Peterson leaned forward, his grip tightening. Why me? You were chosen, she said simply. Sometimes by fate. Sometimes by curse. But once it begins, there is no going back. Jean Daniel leaned back. So what happens if he just throws it away? Then it returns, she said. To him. In dreams. In objects. In people. The spirit it belongs to has tasted his essence. It won't release him so easily. She handed Peterson a small pouch filled with ash, bone fragments, and a red threaded charm. You must keep this on you at all times. It won't stop the whispers, but it will keep the lesser shadows at bay. And the stronger ones? Peterson asked. She didn't answer. As they got up to leave, she placed a hand on Peterson's arm. Be careful tonight. The gate is opening wider. The Gallipot are drawn to its scent. They will hunt what they believe is unguarded power. Jean Daniel scoffed. Gallipot. You mean those werewolf things? Not werewolves, she corrected. Men who gave themselves to cursed spirits. They can only transform at night, and they hunger for soulbound blood. Peterson nodded slowly, the weight of her words sinking in. The walk home. The boys stepped out into the night, the city dim and quiet. Streetlights flickered as if warning them to stay put. Every sound in the distance felt amplified. Dogs barking, the screech of tires, the rattle of wind through tin roofs. Man, that was heavy, Jean Daniel said. Why do these spirit types always have the most dramatic way of explaining stuff? She wasn't joking, Peterson replied. You felt it in there. They passed the closed gate of a mechanic shop, stepping onto a narrower alley as a shortcut. That's when they heard it. A low growl. Rumbling. Wet. Something scraped against the walls. Jean Daniel froze. Please tell me that was a dog. Peterson slowly turned. Dogs don't stand upright. Out from behind a trash pile stepped a creature, its legs canine, but its torso disturbingly human. Muscles pulsed under coarse black fur. Its face was elongated with sharp, dripping teeth and red glowing eyes. It walked on two legs like a man. Another shadow detached from the wall. A second gallipot. Then a third, hunched and twitching. "Run," Jean Daniel whispered. "Too late," Peterson muttered. The first gallipot lunged. Peterson yanked Jean Daniel aside just in time. The beast crashed into metal bins. The other two circled fast. The boys grabbed anything they could: wood, bottles, rocks. They swung wildly. Jean Daniel cracked one across the jaw with a plank, but it didn't even flinch. Peterson jabbed at another's chest with a rebar, but the creature caught it, snarled, and backhanded him into a wall. His vision spun. Blood trickled from his nose. His ribs screamed. Jean Daniel tried to pull him up, but one gallipot tackled him to the ground. Another slashed at Peterson's side, tearing through his shirt and skin. He fell hard, gasping. The medallion pulsed in his pocket. Then, the voice came. "Call my name and I shall lend you my strength. Accept to make a pact with me by letting me possess your body for a day every week." The words boomed through his skull, louder than ever. Peterson looked over. Jean Daniel was on the ground, a claw raised over his chest. The creature was ready to kill him. Peterson coughed. "I accept the contract." The medallion exploded in green light. Wind howled. The alley flickered like lightning cracked through it. Peterson's body lifted off the ground, levitating. His skin darkened, deep black, like coal under pressure. His hair turned bone white. Ancient VEVE patterns glowed across his chest, back, arms, and face like holy runes. His eyes flared with brilliant green fire. The gallipot hissed and backed away. Peterson hovered, then landed gently. His wounds healed instantly, glowing briefly before sealing shut. He took one step forward, and the ground cracked beneath him. The gallipot attacked. He met them midair. With a roar, Peterson's fist collided with the first creature's jaw, sending it hurtling through a wall. The second slashed at him. He caught the claw mid-swing and crushed its wrist. Then with a spinning kick, he launched it skyward into a streetlight. Jean Daniel lay stunned, watching as his best friend, no, something more than his friend, fought with divine precision. The last gallipot lunged, fangs bared. Peterson raised a glowing hand. A green blast erupted from his palm, engulfing the monster. It wailed as its form collapsed into ash and smoke. Breathing heavily, Peterson turned to Jean Daniel. But then his eyes rolled back. The glow faded. And he collapsed. End of Chapter 8. Chapter 9. Pact of 3. The alley was quiet again, the only sound the soft rustle of trash and the low moan of the wind. Peterson lay unconscious, the green glow of the medallion slowly fading beneath his shirt. Jean Daniel stood over him, chest heaving, knees trembling. The gallipots were still alive, but barely. Burned, broken, and terrified, they limped away into the dark, dragging their wounded bodies toward the edge of the nearby forest. None of them dared look back. Jean Daniel dropped to his knees beside Peterson. "Yo. Hey. Wake up, man." He gently shook him, but Peterson didn't respond. "Damn it," Jean Daniel muttered. He glanced around, then hoisted Peterson onto his back, gritting his teeth. "You better be light, bro." It wasn't an easy walk. He carried Peterson through the narrow backstreets, avoiding anyone who might ask questions. Sweat dripped from his forehead. His shoulder throbbed, his ribs ached, but something kept him going, maybe adrenaline, maybe friendship. Maybe fear. By the time he reached Peterson's house, the sky was beginning to pale with the first hints of dawn. He climbed the fence, struggled to balance with Peterson over his shoulder, and finally reached the bedroom window. It creaked open. Jean Daniel slipped inside, stumbling as he lowered Peterson onto the bed. Across the room, Amanda and Miranda lay perfectly still in their shared bed, facing the wall. But their eyes were wide open. They watched silently as Jean Daniel wiped sweat from his forehead, looked at Peterson for a long second, then climbed back out the window. Once the window clicked shut, Amanda whispered, "Was that Jean Daniel?" Miranda nodded. With Peterson on his back. They didn't say another word. The next morning, Peterson stirred. His body felt like lead. His muscles ached. His head was cloudy, like he'd been swimming through dreams too thick to escape. He blinked at the ceiling. Then sat up, slowly. Pain flared along his side, but it wasn't nearly as bad as it should have been. "What happened?" he whispered. Bits and pieces came back. The fight. The Gallipots. Jean Daniel yelling. The medallion's voice. The pact. He remembered agreeing to something, but then it all went blank. He reached under his pillow. The medallion was there. Cold. Silent. Just then, a sound at the window. He turned in time to see Jean Daniel trying to climb in, one leg stuck halfway through. Behind him, Wilkins peeked in nervously. "Yo," Peterson croaked. Jean Daniel slipped and fell in with a grunt. "You're alive," he said, grinning. And not glowing anymore. Wilkins climbed in carefully, eyes wide. "You okay?" Peterson nodded slowly. "I think. Everything hurts, but I'm okay. Kinda dizzy." Jean Daniel flopped into the chair beside the bed. "You blacked out. I had to carry you back here like a fireman. I deserve a medal." "Wait," Peterson said, sitting up straighter. "How are you even moving? That thing had you against the wall." Jean Daniel lifted his shirt. "Not a scratch. It's like whatever power exploded out of you healed me too. Man, it was insane. You floated. Your skin turned dark like coal, your hair went snow white, and there were these glowing symbols all over you. VEVE'S or something." Wilkins blinked. "Wait, what?" Jean Daniel looked over at him. "Right. You missed the whole horror show." Wilkins sat on the edge of the bed, fidgeting with his hands. "So, what exactly happened?" Jean Daniel rubbed his face. "We got attacked by Gallipots. Real ones. Like, walking on two legs, growling nightmare level real. Peterson got slashed up bad. And then the medallion." He pointed, "it went full voodoo explosion. Levitating, glowing symbols, green fire, the works. Peterson turned into some kind of goddamn spirit warrior." Wilkins turned pale. "And you're sure it wasn't just a fever dream?" Peterson shook his head. "I remember the voice. It said if I let it possess me one day a week, it'd give me power." "You agreed to that," Wilkins said, alarmed. "You let something possess you." "I didn't really have a choice," Peterson said. Jean Daniel was about to get killed. "I just said yes." Wilkins stood and started pacing. "This is bad. This is really bad. Spirits don't make casual deals, man. They always want something big." Jean Daniel nodded. "Yeah, but it saved us. We'd be dead if he hadn't said yes." Peterson looked down at the medallion. "We need to find out more. About the spirit. The Loa. The pact." Jean Daniel crossed his arms. "We go back to the old lady." Wilkins shook his head. "She already said too much. If this thing really is one of the exiled Loa, the Zobop, it's not just local legend. It's something older. Darker. We need books. Records. Temple scrolls. Maybe even someone in Port-au-Prince." Peterson met both their eyes. "Then we figure it out. Together. I'm not doing this alone." Jean Daniel nodded. "You saved my life. I'm in." Wilkins hesitated. Then nodded too. "Fine. I'm in. But if you start speaking in tongues or floating around the room, I'm running." Jean Daniel laughed. "You'd leave me behind." "Absolutely." Peterson smiled faintly. But the seriousness returned just as quickly. "Let's make a promise," he said. "From now on, whatever happens, whatever we find, we stick together. No secrets. No lies." Jean Daniel held out his fist. "Deal." Wilkins did the same. "Deal." Peterson bumped his knuckles against theirs. "Deal." And in that quiet room, the three boys, bound by fear, fate, and friendship, sealed a pact of their own. Whatever was coming next, they would face it together. End of Chapter 9. Chapter 10. VEVE'S and Vows. Later that same day, the three boys gathered again, this time in the shade of a mango tree near the edge of town. They brought notebooks, snacks, and questions. Jean Daniel flipped open a notebook he'd borrowed from his stepdad's bookshelf. "So, If this spirit made a pact with you, then it's gotta have a name, right? I never got one, Peterson said, frowning. It just said, call my name. Like I was supposed to know. Wilkins was already scribbling in a notebook, a pile of library books next to him. That's typical spirit behavior, mysterious, dramatic. But that means the name has power. If you say it, you probably open a door. Jean Daniel leaned in. A door to what though? The lower world, or to the spirit itself, Peterson added. They paused as a breeze rustled the leaves. It was the first moment of calm all day. Wilkins broke it with a nervous laugh. Look, I'm the one who reads manga and believes in anime logic, but even this feels too real. You're talking about being possessed once a week. I know, Peterson said, his voice steady. But if this thing is in me, I need to know what it wants, and what it is. Jean Daniel nodded. So we learn everything we can about the Zobop, about VEVE'S, and any Loa tied to medallions like yours. Wilkins sighed. Okay. But if this ends with one of us being dragged into another dimension, I'm blaming both of you. The next day, Peterson walked alone to the small voodoo temple on the far side of the city. It wasn't much, just a modest building with white walls and VEVE drawings in faded chalk across the front. Inside, he met a young Hounjan named Matthew. You've come seeking knowledge, Matthew said, eyeing Peterson's medallion. I need to know what it is, Peterson replied. And what it's turning me into. Matthew studied it, his face darkening. This is old. Older than what's usually taught. It's not tied to the traditional Loa. This is something broken. Forbidden. Peterson's stomach twisted. So it's evil, not evil. But dangerous. It belongs to something that was cast out, a spirit once part of the crossroads, now lost. If it made a pact with you, then it's trying to regain influence through you. Peterson asked carefully, do you know its name? Matthew paused, then retrieved a dusty scroll from a locked box. This is the closest I've found. It describes a spirit called Med Agwe Jal, a splintered form of Agwe, once guardian of passage, twisted into something else after the Zobop rituals corrupted him. The name echoed in Peterson's ears. He felt the medallion pulse. That's it, he whispered. That's the name. That evening, back under the mango tree, Peterson told Jean Daniel and Wilkins everything. They sat quietly, letting it sink in. So what now? Wilkins asked. Peterson held the medallion up. Now we find out how to use this without losing myself. We train. We dig. We get stronger. Because if this thing is coming back through me, then others like the Gallipot are only the beginning. Jean Daniel stood and offered his hand. Then let's make it official. We're not just friends anymore, we're a team. Wilkins groaned but stood too. A team that's probably cursed, but, fine. Peterson smiled and took their hands. The pact was no longer just spiritual. It was personal. And the battle ahead would require more than just courage. It would require unity. End of chapter 10.